This is the Christmas Movie Screenwriter Podcast, episode number 33. Hello and welcome to the Christmas Movie Screenwriter Podcast. I'm your host, Karen McCann. The Christmas Movie Screenwriter is a podcast about writing, producing, selling, and directing Christmas movies. You can find a transcript, show notes, and an action checklist on my website. Just go to christmasmoviescreenwriter.com and look for this episode, which is number 33. Now, on a personal update, I did get my beta reader's notes back today, and I see several ways I can improve my debut novel. Also, after talking to many podcast guests, I am very inspired to write another screenplay. It could be a rom-com or it could be a Christmas movie. Besides that, I am also working on a short story / novella for my author website. So plenty of writing ahead. Life is never dull. And now here is the main segment. Colin Theys is a director and producer from Connecticut. As a director, he brings vibrant energy and inventive storytelling to a wide range of genres, from suspenseful thrillers and heartwarming dramas to humorous sci-fi and claustrophobic horror. His films transport audiences to immersive settings, such as the zombie-ridden streets of Reno in Remains, an underwater hotel in Love in the Maldives, a Catholic school in 1964 in Wishing and Hoping, and a solitary lighthouse on an island in A Predator Returns. Producing for Synthetic Cinema International, Colin has also helped realize movies from Netflix's The Noel Diary to Hallmark's A Biltmore Christmas. Most recently, Colin has directed a series of destination rom-coms for the Hallmark Channel, including A Greek Recipe for Romance, A Costa Rican Wedding, and Polar Opposites. Well, Colin, thank you for coming on the Christmas Movies Screenwriter Podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I told the audience a little bit about you, but why don't you take a minute and tell us about yourself and your business?
Sure. So I work with, I do kind of two different things. On the one hand, I produce with Andrew Gernhardt at Synthetic Cinema International, which is a small production company located in Connecticut. And there I produce an awful lot of Christmas movies, which is probably why I'm here. And then as a director, I have done a lot of work with synthetic cinema, especially in the past. And lately I've been doing a lot of these kind of travel rom-coms. I have a background in visual effects, and I kind of combine production and VFX, and I was trained as an actor. I kind of, all those things combined, I was like, oh, that's directing. So kind of off making movies and traveling around trying to capture interesting locations.
Well, being in back east, you probably have a lot of interesting Christmas locations. So considering this is a Christmas movie screenwriter podcast, let me ask you, what are some key elements that you look for in a Christmas screenplay that would motivate you to produce it?
So, often when I'm producing a Christmas movie, usually it is with a distribution partner. So we have very rarely done Christmas movies that are not for a specific client. So for the most part, we're approached with movies that are ready to go or that we are developing for a network, right? So it's not like I am reading a script and being like, yes, this script. It's either we have a concept that we develop with the eventual outlet, or they've developed it and bring it to us to produce. But when it comes to reading them as a story, generally speaking, Christmas movies are they're romantic stories or nostalgic stories, and I look for good characters and a good romantic core to the story, because that's ultimately what makes it work or not work, is what it's really about. And the Christmas is the kind of the genre, the setting, the tone, the world in which this story occurs. But if your story is not there, it's not going to be a very good movie.
So are most of your projects, the distributor comes to you, or are there times where you say, let's take this out, or you're just automatically
both
hired?
So we do both. We bring pitches, usually pitches, not scripts. to networks and say, here are some ideas. We would love to develop these into full stories, and then work with them to kind of find what story works for them based on where we our idea or based on our concept. And we do kind of the production service side of they've developed a project, they bring it to us in whatever state it may be in. Sometimes it's, are you ready to shoot it? Let's go. Sometimes it's, here's a script that's not really working, fix it and then make it. Or sometimes it's, we want to make a movie about this, do it. Um, so they start all different ways. But just broadly speaking, we're not doing spec movies. Like we're doing movies with the distributor, the ultimate distributor.
Well, that's a great place to be in. Now,
Well, it's a space. I don't know. Maybe your other guests find differently, but I was gonna say I've found that it's a distribution driven space, right? Like there's a lot of a lot of Christmas scripts, but it's the channels and the streamers who decide which ones are going to make get seen. So it's like
right.
they're the ones determining which stories fit into their slate. And so if you're not working with them, it's really hard to hit the right target because you don't know what else is coming.
Right. Right. But you will take that chance when you pitch an idea. You will.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay, got it. Now, when you're reading a script, and I know you most of the time you're going out with pitch, but for the writers out there, what advice would you say? How can writers avoid sounding formulaic and make their script stand out?
Yes. I gotta say the most common email I get is I get somebody who will write and say, I've never I don't normally watch these movies, but I watched some Christmas movies and I figured out the formula. And I wrote one, and I'm like, congratulations. It's not that hard of a formula to figure out, but it's a very hard formula to execute,
True.
because there are pretty strict rules, kind of limiting where you can go, especially if you're working for like for Hallmark, for instance, who has a very strong brand presence. But you still need to be different and you still need to be your own thing. And I think that, to me, that's part of it, is like, don't let the formula drive the choices. Work on what you can work on, a story that you think is interesting and worth doing in its own right. And then, the genre will kind of guide you. Use, sorry, this is a little bit of a confused answer. Use genre, don't be genre, in the sense that a genre gives you shorthand, right? It gives you expectations and it gives you elements that you can use to save storytelling time for other purposes. So if you're going to use a generic element, use it to save time to set something up that you can then use to develop what your story is about more. So if it's, whether that's an interesting premise, like we've done some Christmas movies that are a little bit more imaginative, like Ghosts of Christmas Always, which is kind of in Christmas Hogwarts, or Next Stop Christmas, which is a time traveling train movie, or Biltmore Christmas, which is time traveling period
Yeah.
filmmaking. Those movies, they're very well written. Those are all three of those are excellent scripts, and they use the Christmas genre to save time setting things up. Right? It's like, okay, what this town is like. Here you go. And now that leaves us time to focus on how this time traveling train works and who these characters are, and building this fun world for the character to inhabit. So that's what I would say is, too many scripts use, they use the genre and the formula, and they think that they've solved it, because they can use those elements, they've hit it. But it's like, you need to hit those key marks and put something new in between.
Exactly. Now, I know in the beginning you said you normally go out with a pitch or not a full script or not a spec script. Do you ever have scripts accept some script submissions? And because my next question was going to be, do you tend to hire WGA writers or non-union writers, or maybe someone on staff is writing your screenplays?
So yes, to both. We hire both.
Okay.
Depends on the client. Depends on on the production, the size of the production, on where it's going. Worked with both union and non-union writers repeatedly, and often it's more about who um, who's involved in the production, in the sense of if it's a movie for Hallmark, if it's a movie for Lifetime, they have writers they like, that they're comfortable with. We have writers we like. If there's nobody involved and we're kind of more on our own, we might pick somebody in particular. Or if we're bringing a pitch that comes from a writer, because that does also happen. Um, sometimes it's us with the pitches, sometimes it's writers with the pitches. Uh, the every time is different. It's the only rule is that it's never the same
Right.
process.
Right. But a non-WGA writer probably wouldn't have enough experience to just sell a pitch. I would think you guys would want a spec script.
It's more to do with, I don't know if that's true. I think that um,
That's good news.
at this point, I'm non-DGA, and I've done 21 features. It's like
Wow.
as
Wow.
much how your path to the path for a person in this industry is as much to do with where they are, where they started, and how they've moved than it is a linear progression that's always the
Right.
same. Like if
Right.
you start off operating camera on a big union TV series, you're probably going to join the DGA on your first job because you're in a
Right.
union show. Whereas if you start working in a non-union context, it's the other way around. You could probably produce or direct for your entire career and never get into the guild, because the guild,
Huh.
they make you join based on the production, not based on you, right? And
Huh.
the same for the writer. Like there are non-union writers who've done fantastic work, and reliably, and it's just about their credits and their relationships, and that is a double-edged sword. There's people who have excellent relationships and no experience who get jobs, and there's people who have excellent work and no relationships and are not considered.
Huh.
It's a difficult balance.
Right. Now, my next question was going to be about spec scripts. I realize that most of your stuff is you're hired. You're in a great position because you already have distribution relationships or network relationships. But I'll ask this anyway. What types of Christmas movie scripts would your company hope to target for development? Are there any specific themes or settings or characters you're focused on, or even locations? I mean, this could be before we started recording, we talked about international rom-coms. I'm just wondering if that is something that your company is targeting, some targeting for development.
Sure. I think that the answer is it's a moving target.
Yes.
That you have to just be aware of what's been made recently and try to not do any of those things exactly. But yeah, I mean, what we're looking for is always something that's different, that's inventive. We can't always predict what's going to work next, but we are always trying to do something that isn't exactly the same. We like to do things that are not not typical, right? If you look at Synthetic's recent movies, Synthetic put out a dog sled movie. They put out a like Christmas Quest. It's like an Indiana Jones-esque
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love
Christmas
that.
adventure movie. The ones I named before that are time travel and ghosts. And we did 12 Days of Christmas Eve, which is like Groundhog Day at Christmas. Like we're always trying to find things that are unique. Oh, we also did Where Are You Christmas, which was the like Pleasantville Christmas, basically, where the
Yeah,
world
yeah, the
turns
black
black
and
and
white.
white,
That
and then
was
they have to
great.
slowly restore it. So,
Yeah, it's
I
very
would say
creative.
if people have, and every single one of those scripts came from a different direction. Like none of them were the same. So it's like if you have a great idea, do that, because I think that's the driving factor. Take that great idea and figure out how to make it work with the formula. Don't start with the formula and try to find a new idea. But there is also, sometimes it is location driven. Like one time years and years ago, we just got a call. They're like, we want to do a movie in Alaska. Pitch us an Alaska movie. And we just came up with
Really?
like 25 Alaska pitches. None of them happened, but that kind of thing happens all the time.
Okay.
So we're always, always looking for the thing that's different and interesting and new. In terms of spec scripts, I'm probably not the best person to talk about specs because we don't do a lot of spec to network production in Christmas specifically. I do read them sometimes, but it's got to be pretty pretty different. Like if I get a submission and I'm like, wow, that's a crazy idea, I might read it. But part of the reason that I don't read as many is just that it's a very, for me, it's a very difficult path to take a spec script to production. So it's got to be something really unique um, to to look at. Because if I bring a spec script through our path, um, it's often more difficult than a
Hmm.
developing than developing a
Of course.
project
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they didn't have say in the process, right? It's like
Right.
when
Now
when
you
the
mentioned
client was
you
involved, it's different.
you said that was not the typical path for Christmas, the Christmas genre. Are there other uh, genres that synthetic might be open to spec scripts, or is it across the board?
Sure. Well,
It's
this is also why I specified that there's kind of two different aspects to what I do. There's the synthetic producing side, and there's myself as a director. Um, Synthetic, I don't, they're just not really don't read a lot of spec scripts, to be honest. It's not to say don't submit them, but it's not just not what our work has been. Personally, I do read more spec scripts because I'm looking to kind of broaden the work that I do and to work in different areas. So often it's a little bit of a catch
right,
22 in terms of what to submit to
right.
people because it's like I get submitted a lot of Christmas spec scripts that I don't read because I get hired to do those. So what I'm looking for is
Right,
something different,
right.
right? It's like I want to find a thing that I'm going to read uh, that I want to put some time behind to make happen that might otherwise not happen on its own. So often I'm reading scripts that are different than the scripts that people are sending me, or I'm looking for scripts that are different than the scripts
Right,
that people are sending me.
right. But you also need, I'm sure you're very cognizant of what the market is looking for. So, I mean, you probably wouldn't want to do like an historical uh, drama because those are really hard to sell. I mean, I would think synthetic would be, or you would be kind of with your finger on the pulse, knowing perhaps rom-coms are easier to sell than dramas or,
Yes, although at the
so
same time, you kind of have to be a little bit of a starry-eyed optimist to work in this field, and
true, true.
sometimes the projects that I will push, develop, pursue on my own are not very practical. I actually, in fact, have a historical drama that I'm working on. I was working on it the other day, and I
Oh,
know they're
funny.
hard
Okay.
to sell, but like it's a great script.
Okay,
But,
that's good
would love
news.
to do it. It's really hard to do. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, certainly I do try to be aware, and for me, it's less about trying to find something that's super marketable than it is about trying to find something that is um, a reasonable scale to produce. Like the historical drama that I would say it's kind of more of a historical thriller, but it's very
Okay.
contained. It's
Right, right.
practical, it's producible. So I do know how production works and try to like. I'm not going to pitch a like $15 million
Yeah.
spec to somebody. Like I'm trying to find sensible things that realistically I could do, uh, but that are different.
Okay. Now, if you could give advice to your younger self about producing Christmas movies or rom-coms, what would it be?
Yeah. I would say character story first. Always. It's so hard to or so easy to get lost in how to make it look right, how to make it look like winter. Um, but and and it's so easy to fall into the trap of dodging expectation and dodging genre just because you want to be different. But I think you need to be more, embrace the useful things, embrace the things that fit the genre, and focus your efforts on the parts that are genuinely different, and focus your efforts on the characters and the dynamic and the relationship. In fact, actually, I was saying the other day that last summer I was doing a lot of visual effects work, and so sometimes as I'm doing that, I can kind of watch movies on the side. And so I decided I was going to do a catch-up rom-com tour for the past 5 years. And so I watched
Oh,
65
oh my
rom-coms
goodness.
that came out in the
Wow.
past 5 years. And
Wow.
all just back to back, like just right through them.
Holy
And
cow.
as I got through, I was like, I spend a lot of time when I'm pitching thinking about like, okay, what if they're on a cruise ship and she's kind of mistaken identity is this and he's working for like trying to set up this complicated puzzle. But when you think back on the movies and the ones that work and don't work, the setup is important, but it's the setup. It's like what I remember about them is who are those two characters and how did they get along?
All right.
That's it. So it's like that is really the core of the movie, and it's what's going to make it work or not work. And people too often neglect that in the interest of genre
Plot.
and world and plot. Sometimes plot.
Yeah.
But usually it's setting. Usually it's like
Oh, this,
they
okay.
want to have a snowball fight, and so they just have a scene that's a snowball fight, but like nothing happens in it. And just, what is this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because I think those kind of writers are reading some blog that says, oh, you have to have the tropes. There's got to be the hot cocoa scene. There's got to be the snowball fight scene. There's got to be the wrapping the gift scene. And it's like, it's boring if it's not moving the plot forward or we're learning something about the character. But
yeah, and that is one of the challenges of when I say Christmas movie, like I I think that recently in the last decade, Christmas movie has kind of taken on its own subgenre of like a very specific meaning. And so I'm talking about that, not just movies that take place at Christmas. But
right.
one of the challenges of doing those is often that there are so many rules and so many things you don't do that it can be challenging to find drama in the required activities, right? It's like you have to have a Christmas festival scene.
Right.
What are they doing there? So
Right.
sometimes they can feel padded out, and it's a real skill to keep it engaging through those moments.
Exactly. Now, my next question, I know you guys work comes to you and you are in a lucky position of being hired quite often. But I'll ask this anyway. What is the best way for screenwriters to connect with you if they were to submit a pitch or even a spec?
I would say my email address is on IMDb. Just send me a message, but don't send a whole script. Just send a
Yeah,
log
yeah,
line. And I apologize if I don't answer. It's just
of
there's a
course.
lot of connections and people get
Right.
busy, and
Of
doesn't
course.
mean it doesn't get seen sometimes. Uh,
Right.
so
Exactly.
and I do the same thing. I always say that this whole field is like 80% throwing letters down a well, and then somebody calls you and they're like, "Are you available on Tuesday?" And then you're working
There
again,
you
and it's like
go.
most of what you put out doesn't get answered, but you got to do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the nature of the beast, but it's, that's how the industry works. But
Yeah.
now,
And it's as much about
to,
when you catch someone as what you're sending, right? So it's like you need to be
true.
the right thing at the right time. Oh
That's
God, that sounds
exactly
so
right.
cliched, but it really is the truth.
No, you're exactly right. Exactly. Now, to wrap up, would you like to share any social media details so our audience can keep track of your work?
Sure, you can find Synthetic Cinema has a very active Facebook page, and I am on Threads and Instagram as Colin Theys.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, Colin, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience. Thank you for coming on the Christmas Movie Screenwriter podcast today.
Thank you.
And now for my action checklist. I have 5 items for your action checklist from my interview with Colin. Number 1, focus on strong characters and romance. A Christmas movie lives or dies by its characters and romantic core. Make them memorable, relatable, and engaging. Instead of forcing holiday tropes, build a story that feels authentic and heartfelt. Number 2, use the formula, but add something new. Christmas movie formulas exist for a reason, but don't let them make your script feel stale. Find ways to surprise the audience while keeping the comfort of familiarity. Number 3, think about market and distribution. Networks develop most projects in-house, so know what they buy before you pitch. Your script must fit the brand of the network or streamer you're targeting. Number 4, character development over Christmas gimmicks. A strong setup and character arcs are more important than stuffing your script with Christmas activities. Think the snowball scene, the hot cocoa scene, the wrapping present scene, where there is no character development or no plot development. So leave those out. Build emotional stakes and relationships that resonate beyond the holiday backdrop. And number 5, study the market like a pro. Colin watched 65 recent rom-coms to analyze trends. Are you studying the competition? Watch what's selling, learn what works, and find your unique angle to stand out. Well, that's the show. Thank you for listening. To show your support, please give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. And you can fuel more great content by buying me a hot cocoa on Buy Me a Coffee. Just look for the page Christmas Movie and explore other inspiring podcasts and blogs on our website at christmasmoviescreenwriter.com. I'm your host, Karen McCann. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next Christmas Movie Screenwriter podcast. Bye.